Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
We are live for real on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. And the point of discussion today, it's not even a discussion. I think it's not even up for debate, but we're still going to give our opinions anyway. The point of discussion is Monaco should be on the Formula One calendar. And the two of us here on the Inside Line F1 podcast, myself, Soumil Arora, and F1 Stats Guru Sundaram, along with Kunal, who's also not a part of this episode, but still resonates with the same idea, we all feel that there is no reason whatsoever for Formula One to take away Monaco. And you might be saying, oh, it's a boring Sunday, it's 2 hours gone in the drain, but there's so much more to Monaco, Sundaram. There's so much more. It's like, it's the crown jewel of the calendar. It's the shining diamond in the triple crown. It's what makes Formula One classy. Sure, you can make something classy massy, but you can't make something massy into something that's full of class. And you take away Monaco and you lose what Formula One is all about: the class, the elegance, the best drivers in the world racing at the toughest circuit in the world, in the fastest cars in the world, in front of the richest people in the world. That is the core of what Formula One is all about. Take that away, I don't think Formula One's the same. You can't take Monaco away.
I think you've explained that exceptionally well, because even if you go to any driver and ask him which is the one track that you would absolutely love to win at, and which is the most satisfying win for you, and I'm sure everyone will unanimously say Monaco, just because of the challenge that it presents. And no matter how many street circuits that we have, no matter how many classy circuits that we have with all the glitz and the glamour, no matter how much of Las Vegas we try to bring in, the ultimate race that is synonymous to prestige will always be Monaco. So regardless of the limitations that is, I'm not saying it's a problem, I'm not saying it's an issue, I'm saying it's a limitation, or I would actually rather to say it's a characteristic. Regardless of all of that, I think Monaco stills something that is very, very unique.
It's irreplaceable. It is to racing circuits what Ferrari is to teams. If you think of Formula One, you think of Monaco first. You think of the Grand Prix. You think of the yachts. You think of the parties. You think of Friday not being there in the calendar because everyone needs to go shopping. That is what it's all about. And imagine if you win the Monaco Grand Prix, you add your name to over 100 years of excellence. Nuvolari, Sterling Moss. We've got Fangio, Hakkinen, Raikkonen, Schumacher, Alonso, Rosberg, Ricardo, Verstappen, Senna, Prost, Lauda, Graham Hill, so many more.
Webber.
Bruce McLaren, Weber, exactly. And I feel honestly, the greatness of a prize can be measured by the list of people and the quality of people who haven't won it. And here's a fun list of people who haven't won Monaco, including people who combined have won a total of 14 World Championships and 161 Grand Prix wins. James Hunt, Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet, Jim Clark, Damon Hill, Alberto Ascari, Emerson Fittipaldi, Mario Andretti, and Jacques Villeneuve. They have never won Monaco. I think that tells you how big of a prize Monaco is. And this is why we should all just stop the debate. And we'll talk more about overtaking and two stops and pit lanes and everything around that to see whether this race will be as entertaining as we wish it will be. But we'll get to that in a second. But first up, I've got to halt the momentum and ask you guys to subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast, because we did a lot of data digging, which is something we love to do here at the Inside Line F1 podcast. And we found out that a majority of you who watch our content stick around till the very end, but don't subscribe. Pretty rude of you guys. Come on, subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast. But Monaco, Sundaram, if I was a driver, I'd want to win that race and spray the champagne there and listen to my national anthem being played by the National Band of Monaco. That is stuff you dream of, honestly.
Absolutely. And I kind of understand the debate. It's fair to an extent. And everyone watches sport for different reasons. So for example, between the both of us, you're the bigger football fanatic, and I watch it on a very casual basis. So we would have very differing perspectives. The same can also apply to Formula One. People watch. There's a certain section of people who watch the sport for the technicalities and the actual challenges. Some people just watch it on a more casual basis, and that's totally fine. So if there's a certain section of people who want to watch it for the overtakes, that's also fine.
Yeah.
But what's important to understand is the sort of USP that Monaco really provides. And if I tell you, let's say if I tell a couple of circuits names, what is the first thing that really hits your mind? So if I say Mexico, what are you thinking?
High altitude,
Altitude. If I talk about Monza, what are you thinking?
speed.
You're talking speed. So there is a very distinct character to, I'd say, a certain section of tracks that is irreplaceable. Can you find a faster track than Monza? Probably not. Can you find a higher track than Mexico? Probably not. Can you find a track that can replace Monaco and still add overtaking to it? It's difficult. And what we don't appreciate enough is the challenge that drivers have to go around those 3.3 kilometers of Monaco with barely any walls, with barely any second chances. That is what we don't appreciate enough in the need for more overtakes and more wheel to wheel battles. And I hope people understand that the difficulty that drivers have to go through to try and keep your car within the confines of those walls. That's what you truly tune in to appreciate around Monaco. So in that sense, I think it should never leave the calendar.
It shouldn't. And just like every day isn't the same and every isn't the same, not every race is the same. Monaco is not always about the Sunday. It's about the challenge of Saturday. And it's the greatest qualifying session of the entire season because it's the toughest. As Sundaram mentioned, the margins are barely there. And this weekend, we could have rain in qualifying to 60% chance, and that would make it even tougher. And just the idea of putting in a qualifying lap at a circuit that's so narrow. I think Nelson Piquet described it very well when he said that it's like trying to drive a bicycle within your house. And Monaco houses are very small, and he lived in Monaco at that time, so it is quite representative. But I think it's even more challenging than that. I think it's like walking a balancing beam with fire underneath, and if you slip, that's $1 million gone in one shot. And the speeds they're taking there, Sundaram, sure, they might not be Monza level speeds or Imola level speeds. Pretty serious though. Like you can reach up to 250, 270 at some points and go down to 60. And the impact, it's even bigger than some other circuits because the walls are here. There's no runoff. If you hit it, you break the car. And that is even scarier. So it's I don't think Sunday is that. Sure, you might not have a very, very entertaining 2 hours all the time. I'm not saying this weekend. There is a caveat that might change that. But just the spectacle of that 1 hour of qualifying in Monaco, I think that tops the entire race weekend. It just makes up for all of it.
And I think there's nothing wrong in that. If we have
Yeah.
24 races in a season, and if there is one race which is largely around qualifying, then so be it. We have a variety of different circuits, different tracks, and different experiences. And if Monaco is about the Saturday, then what's wrong in it? There's no harm. The interesting factor is, and it's actually what I'm going to share right now, the insight is it's of polar opposites. If you take a list of the pole sitters at Monaco, the best of the best, the cream of the crop, like they say, tends to do well around Monaco. So the biggest names of the sport, or rather the world champions, are literally in the top 20 pole sitters around Monaco. You'd also have the likes of a Sterling Moss right up there. And then, of course, at the very top, you have an Ayrton Senna. So you must be really special and really skilled to be able to take pole around Monaco more than once. But also on the flip side, interestingly, Monaco has seen the most maiden pole sitters in Formula One, 12. Imagine putting your car on pole position for the very first time in your Formula One career, and that happens in Monaco. I think there's no better feeling or no something that's more satisfying than taking pole position at Monaco. So it's a test of the toughest.
It is. And a special shout out to all the greats who've made it work here, like Senna, like Schumacher, like Prost before Senna. Rosberg has been incredible here as well. Charles Leclerc has been a great qualifier. 3 pole positions here. It's unbelievable the kind of pace he can carry. But this weekend, it will be very tough, and we shall get to it. But the bigger question, more than which team is going to be fast and who takes pole position and who's going to win, it's going to be, are we going to have a fun time on Sunday? And the Formula One board, then the race organizers, they thought very closely about that. And they said, okay, let's spice it up. Since last year was such a disaster, and it was because we didn't even see one pit stop because the teams had a red flag, they changed their tires and didn't even need to pit. They said, let's make it mandatory for drivers to use at least 3 sets of tires during the race weekend. That could be interpreted as 2 pit stops, but if there's a red flag, you can still change a set of tires and get away with it. The important rule is not 2 pit stops, it's 3 sets of tires. And mandatory tires in the race will be the mediums and the hards. Now, importantly, tire deck does not matter here. So even though last year's soft compound tire is this year's medium, it's pointless because Monaco, you barely ever have tire degradation here. So it's pretty much a free for all. And the race will largely be dictated by teams and drivers hunting for a pit window and seeing when they can box in, and then their rivals trying to undercut them or overcut them and trying to put in a qualifying lap so that they can get ahead. But normally, Sundaram, the race strategy would have been you put your medium compound tires, you start with your softs, you wait till a lap 16, lap 20, something like that. Whenever the window comes up, you put in the best possible in lap and the best possible out lap, hope for the very best, cycle out and win the race. But this time you've got to do it twice. And because tire degradation is not even a factor this year, it really throws up when and how you could pit. Like theoretically, you could have a midfield team just basically throwing their hands up in the air and saying, okay, let's just take both of our pit stops early. Let's bank on a VSC. And when other people have to make 2 pit stops, they just basically can go scot-free, keep the same set of tires, and get track position. Like it's all up in the air. How can you tell what the implication of 2 mandatory pit stops is going to be when there's no clue of what degradation is going to be like?
And that's something which people also need to understand. So firstly, last year's race was a disaster, not in the sense that everyone ran literally on the same compound. The problem was the top 10 ended the race in the exact same order, and that's happened for the very first time in Formula One history. So although you might say Monaco is all about pole position, the pole sitter always wins. When you have the top 10 starting and finishing the same order, that's a little, what I would say, it's not ideal. So that's really what triggered this directive for this year, that we'll have 3 sets of tires. And it's not going to put emphasis on overtaking. Let me tell you that it's still not going to mandate or necessitate that we'll see more overtakes. You need to understand that the wider scheme of things, with the sort of pace performance difference that cars tend to have, which is very, very less. The cars are very close to close to each other this season, and the fact that the budget cap is also in place. So if you go do a little bit of an aggressive move and you tend to crash your car, that's a huge bill which you don't want to take. So it's not a case that overtaking is not possible. Drivers are also being a little wary of not putting their car in the wall and accumulating that big enough bill. Where it's really going to impact is strategy. When we say if it's a dry race and there are no red flags, you really have to time where you go into the pit stops and who comes up ahead, who comes behind. What they're targeting is the shuffling of the order. That's what they're really hoping to see. An undercut here, an overcut there. Anything is possible. Monaco is one of those few circuits where an undercut and an overcut are equally possible. And it really, really depends if you're either in traffic or you're out in clear air. If you're in clear air, the overcut is the way to go. If you're in traffic, the undercut is the way to go. And if you have to do that twice in a race, that just opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, and it really, really makes things open. You could start off with the medium, go extremely long, put the hards for a little bit, then a safety car comes in, and then it's all about extracting pace from the hards. Like, what tires are you going to be on, and how quickly can you fire them up in the moment when you need to put in those qualifying laps? Because Monaco is a lot like a marathon. You save up your energy for a couple of key moments, and then you have to accelerate like crazy. Can you fire up your tires in those moments? Can you get the maximum performance out and put in a qualifying lap when your rival is in the pit lane? And we've seen this time and time again. 2016, I know it was mixed conditions, but the overcut-undercut dilemma between Lewis Hamilton and Daniel Ricciardo, phenomenal. 2022, again, I know it was wet, But Sergio Perez beat the Ferraris by making one pit stop, whereas by making two pit stops, whereas the Ferraris made one because the track conditions were changing that dramatically. Again, same scenario. It is possible. If you have two pit stops, it really opens everything up. And even 23, right? Before the rain came in, we were so annoyed at Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin missing their strategy up because had they pit on the right lap, they would have possibly been able to get past Max Verstappen and the Red Bull and taken
Don't
that
take me
win.
there.
Yeah.
Don't take me
It could
back
have been
there.
the last one and the best one, honestly.
It could have. It could have.
But that's the point. Monaco is not just about overtaking, it's about looking at the timing. And Pankaj has put up a
I
great
love
comment
this.
saying that
I
I feel
love
Red Bull
this.
might use Yuki to get the pack back up to get a max win, which is also possible. Which is also possible. See, you can't count these things out. It's just not a traditional motor race where you get past the others and win. You just have to do more thinking in Monaco and more mapping out and more patience and more waiting, which makes it brilliant, I feel. I think I'm very positively inclined towards a two-stop rule. But of course, we'll need a couple of years to see how it actually plays out in execution, right? It's hard to tell already.
No, there are definitely signs from what we've seen in Qatar in 2023 when Pirelli mandated the stint lengths for every
Yeah.
team. Everyone knew when everyone's going to be pitting. So when there's a hard limit on that, it becomes too predictable. So yes, everyone will push till the very end, but here they've not mandated stint lengths, which I really really like. Secondly, what we saw around Imola, going one step softer also means that there's a certain level of degradation. And again, F1 is not telling you that you really need to use all three compounds. They're not telling you that these are the stint lengths. So they've still left a lot of it open to the teams and the strategy teams to kind of play around with. So there's a lot of randomness still possible, and that's why I think this is a very positive move. How it turns out, we'll figure, and if it's overwhelmingly positive, we'll probably see this being used in a lot of other races this season, maybe Singapore and the likes.
Ooh, no. I think Singapore is good how it is. Singapore is a really good race. Ah, I I don't know.
Still a one
Actually, two
stopper.
mandatory pit stops, in Singapore wouldn't be too bad because then you're forcing drivers to put in a qualifying lap every single lap at the most physically demanding circuit on the calendar, which would
Indeed.
be insane. Oh, I love the sound of that. But what would success for the new rule look like for you, Sundaram? How would you say, or when would you say that this rule has worked according to you?
See, maybe trying to clear the situation, because a lot of people whom I've spoken with or I've checked with online polls, a lot of people believe this two-stop rule will increase the number of overtakes. Okay. And a little bit of context as well. I see this a lot on social media. People tend to say that smaller cars is the way to go. If we had smaller cars, there'll be a lot more overtakes. We'll see a lot more wheel-to-wheel battles. I actually dug up the data of the last 40 years. Okay. The last 10 years in Monaco, we've seen a total of 70 overtakes. So that's an average of 7 overtakes per race. If you combine the overtakes in the last 40 years, an average of 10, it's not significantly higher. It's not even double. So the fact is, overtaking around Monaco has perennially always been the case, even with smaller cars. And I will say, if you say, yes, Formula E has had 197 overtakes, 117 overtakes in the last 2 years, it's not just because that the cars are smaller. It's also because the aero profiles are different. The cars
Yeah.
are not as quick as Formula One cars. They don't have the sort of downforce levels. And of course, they have more mishaps than in Formula One. And like I said, drivers are a little bit more cautious around going with aggressive moves. So it's not just a case of reducing the size of the cars. If the car is still going at 300 kph, it's still going to be difficult. So overtaking in Monaco is not an issue in my opinion. It's not a challenge in my opinion. I think it's high time people realize that it's a circuit characteristic. And that's when you really stop looking at what drivers are able to do on track and you look at the rest of the team at the pit wall and then look at what they're able to do with the pit stop. So in my opinion, my request is, don't look at the drivers, see what the rest of the team is able to do. Also, pit stops, the team that's able
Pit
to
stops.
execute the best pit stops. And probably the only positive for Ferrari this year is they are the team that have been doing the best pit stops this season. That's probably the only positive they're going to be having this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Actually, pit stops are a huge point because 2016, Ricardo lost because of an ill timed pit stop. And we also had Valtteri Bottas come up with the world's slowest pit stop right here. And it's such a small pit lane. It genuinely is so easy to get it wrong. A 60 kph limit, the lowest of the entire year. And there's barely any space for the teams to operate on as well. They have to have a multi-story pit building, and that's where the engineers are going to be sitting
It's a
atop the
challenge for the team
garage.
as well. It's a
It
challenge for the
is.
team as well, not just the drivers.
It's amazing. It's special. It's what Formula One is all about. And if you're wondering, okay, so basically what you guys have said in the last 19 minutes is Sunday is going to be boring and it should be boring. No, that's not what we're saying. Sunday could be exciting, but you may not see a lot of overtakes. So you can also tweak the way you watch a Formula One race. You don't have to sit with the TV on just alone watching the cars go by. You could do either of two things. You could either observe the data and have a lot of fun with it and keep tracking pit windows to see when people could go to the pit lane and overthink about it, which is so much fun because that's when you're thinking of permutations and combinations, and that's when the race becomes more exciting because all the scenarios that the teams are thinking of are now playing out. Sip on some champagne or some margarita, talk about how beautiful and how elegant the other people's dresses are, and then be surprised when an overcut and undercut happens. Like, that's also fine. That's also another way to enjoy Monaco. You don't have to expect a 2 hour blockbuster cinema race out of it. If the race is different, maybe tweak the way you watch it as well. I don't know, just an idea to enjoy the race more.
And that's our little handbook on how you need to watch Monaco. Now we can move on to the teams.
Now we can move on to the teams. Wow. Who walks in as the favorite here is my biggest question.
And I think you know the answer as well, don't you?
I mean driver, not team.
That's okay. That's a difficult.
That makes it more fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, that makes it more fun. Okay, so do we want to kind of get done with the teams then? I think that's a smaller conversation then.
You think it's a smaller conversation?
I think so. See, based on what we've seen so far, and based on what we've seen in Imola, hands down, I think McLaren is the team to beat. They have the best downforce levels of all the teams this year. That's why they're also struggling on the straights. Monaco doesn't have a lot of straights, and they are the best at slow speed corners. So you can't look at any other team beyond McLaren. Even medium speed corners, high speed corners, McLaren is the benchmark. So if I have to take a prediction on who's going to be on pole and win, I can't look beyond McLaren.
No, come on. You're not going to count Max Verstappen in it.
Max is still an outlier. If both McLaren drivers make a little bit of a mistake, that's when it gives the opportunity to Max. So if they're able to deliver and if they have that much bit of a gap in terms of pace this weekend, I think even Red Bull might struggle.
Actually,
but we still know. I don't think so. Anyone really knows how Red Bull's new upgrade package has done well. So I might be speaking a little too early. How it's done at Imola is great. How it fares in Monaco, we still don't know.
The new floor is clearly working. They're getting more downforce out of it. Max feels more confident. And the way Max was able to evolve the setup from Friday to Sunday really worked at Imola. And I'm predicting a Max Verstappen win for two reasons. Number one, confidence. I don't think any driver in the world right now, even if you take away the Imola result, is as confident in their abilities as Max Verstappen is. And by confident, I don't mean arrogant confident. I mean quiet confident. Look, he just went to the Nürburgring and smashed the GT3 lap record. I know it might be something peripheral and outside Formula One, but that is a big deal. That is a huge driving achievement. And then he made an around the outside move on Oscar Piastri at Imola, a track where it is notoriously hard to pass. And then he also dominated that race and didn't even let Lando Norris break into his gap once. That is some confidence coming in from a driver. And that you need in qualifying. And in Monaco, it's a place where car characteristics are somewhat negated. And the driver becomes a more differentiating factor than the car in itself because of, firstly, how tight the circuit is. And also, secondly, how much courage you need to go past there and how much confidence you need in your machine to make sure that it works exactly how you want it to work. And that, I feel, Verstappen is able to generate more than anyone else. And secondly, Sundaram, I'm not that confident of McLaren's in-race management. Not for what McLaren are doing, but
good point.
Because of the position where they have gotten themselves in. They have to think about two drivers and not one. And Red Bull Racing can solely focus on Max. And this weekend, I think that's more important because you have to make strategic calls twice, not once. And in that case, I know who I'm backing.
No, you're totally right in that regard. If talking about pure pace, McLaren's at the very top, but talking on based on strategy, Red Bull is literally bulletproof, and they know what they're doing always, and they're not really bothered by what happens around them. They have very solid plans and simulations going into the race. So if they have to do a strategic call that, like you said, twice in a race, in that regard, I think Red Bull is right up there.
Do you
So in
think we
strategy,
can?
strategy is Red Bull, pace is McLaren, pit stops is Ferrari. It's not going to be an easy race.
It's not going to be an easy race. And qualifying wise, Oscar Piastri has been a great qualifier here. Last year, only a tenth and a half behind Charles Leclerc in his second Monaco GP. And Leclerc, we know, is one of the very best to ever do it at this place. But Max Verstappen is due a big qualifying. Remember 24, he just didn't have the confidence all throughout the weekend. But in 22, he kind of got robbed by that crash between Sainz and Perez at the last corner. And he got pole in 23, but I still feel Verstappen in Monaco, we haven't seen the best of him. But then on the other hand, Lando Norris also got a pretty good result here back in 22, wasn't it? Was it 22 or 23? I think he finished third here in 23, and he had a pretty decent qualifying too. And generally, if you look at last year's record, he was the better qualifier compared to Oscar. So it's a very muddled up scenario where you can't tell who's going to be very good. And George Russell's been excellent in qualifying this year. The Mercedes, as we discovered while digging up some data, has a lot of mechanical grip and is really good at the slow corners. Could he be a part of that whole dynamic as well?
Oh, he absolutely will be, because what Mercedes has been struggling with is higher temperatures, and that's not going to be the case in Monaco. So they can breathe a little easier before they go to Spain and the likes. So in that case, I mean, Mercedes had a terrible outing in Imola, so they'll really be going into this race with a lot of aggression, trying to make up for a lot of points that they lost around Imola. So definitely keep an eye out for George Russell. Probably keep an eye out for Kimi Antonelli as well. I think if anyone will really put in a special lap, it'll probably be Max or Leclerc. I really want to see what he can do in that Ferrari, because in today's press conference, he wasn't very optimistic of Ferrari's chances this weekend. He said, we are literally struggling in the slow speed corners, which is quite the opposite from how Ferrari was last year. They were one of the best in the slow speed corners, but a complete designed overhaul has meant that they are literally struggling in the slow speed corners. Sorry, Ferrari fans, but so far it doesn't look great for them. But you can never count out what Leclerc can do in his home race. We've seen that before as well, back in 2021.
But it's going to be so hard because
Yeah.
confidence is what you need in Monaco. And if he doesn't have the confidence in the car, it's going to be tough. Couple of comments have come in. Pankit has said that I usually have the data channel opened up in the F1 TV app along with the live feed, which is incredible. I think that's a great way to enjoy the race. Sure, there are different ways to view it, and it's always incredible to see how different people watch the race. Some people watch it to notice the fashion or how beautiful the cars are or the locations, and that's also phenomenal. Like my mom watches a Formula One race and she says, "Oh my God, look at how pretty their helmets are." And look at these incredible countries they're racing in. I want to go visit them, which is a totally fair perspective. But nerds like us, we enjoy watching the data a lot. So that I respect that. And Krishna is saying you're not considering Williams. We'll win. Does he mean Williams?
Possibly.
Possibly. Which wouldn't be a bad shout, considering we just found out that Carlos Sainz has one of the very best qualifying records around Monaco on the current grid. Last four qualifyings, he's been in the top four consistently. And you're saying, Sundaram, that throughout his career, he's never been out of Q3, even in his Toro Rosso days.
He has a 100% Q3 record. He has a 100% point scoring record around Monaco. Uh, I mean, even in terms of point scoring, you would say Lewis is always more or less there in points. I think he's finished out of the points only once, Lewis. Fernando also has a pretty good record in terms of finishing. But these are a few drivers who have done consistently well around Monaco. So definitely you can't count out Williams. They've been very consistent in the last couple of races. But I would say slow speed corners is literally not something that they're very strong in as well. So you really need to keep an eye out for them as well.
I particularly feel sad about Ferrari though when you mentioned that they've lost their slow speed car confidence and the car characteristic that way. Oof, it's going to be tough because they have two of the very best qualifiers, but if they can't make it work, they're going to be stuck. And it's not like Imola where passing in race pace can bail them out. Monaco is going to be tough that way. Hmm.
You never really have Charles Leclerc coming into a race weekend and being downbeat straight away. So if he
Yeah.
comes into a race weekend and tells that we literally have no chance on a Thursday, then things are not well. And we know how disappointed he was after Imola. So although there is space on the race day, there's not enough space on qualifying. And in Monaco, that's going to be the problem. It works well around other tracks who are able to make up places, but when Ferrari are a little rough and raw around qualifying and also in terms of strategy, that's going to be a little problematic for them this weekend. But I hope that's not the case.
Likewise, Formula One needs Ferrari and Formula One needs Monaco. They're both in the same boat, I feel, and not having them do well, yeah. Krishna is saying I used to use multi-viewer, but this year's F1 TV app is pretty good. It's interesting you say that because for me, it just never switches on to that data feed. Weirdly, I don't know if the F1 TV bosses are watching. Something's not working. Maybe it's my device. I don't know. And it's the Williams meme from Reddit that you're talking about. Haven't opened that in a while. Punkit's asking, what about red flags? Will the pit stops during a red flag count as their mandatory stop? Just to clear it out, there are no mandatory stops. You just have to use three different sets of tires. And yes, if there is a red flag and you change tires, it will count as you getting through with one mandatory set. So technically, then you'll only have to use two more sets. So yes, you're right. If a red flag comes in, they do effectively get a pit stop waved off in real life. Do we know much about the penalty, Sundaram?
I believe there's a 30-second penalty if you don't adhere to this mandate that you need to have three sets of tires. I think there's a 30-second penalty and a few other sub clauses as well. But if it rains, then this mandate goes out of the window. And like you said, if there's red flags, if you have one or two red flags, and if they change their tires in the pits, that goes into the consideration as well.
Hmm. It's going to be a fun weekend then because you really don't know how teams are going to play out this whole race and when and how they might stop and what tires they might use at what point. Could be fun. And you might see a lot of teams and drivers pushing to get some positions at the start because track position is so important. So turn one is also going to be crazy. But the last thing that we should end upon is a myth about Monaco that you're going to bust for us, Sundaram. What's it all about?
Yes, let's bust a Monaco myth because you often tend to hear people telling you that Monaco is all about qualifying and also about the pole sitter. If you qualify on pole position, you always end up winning. And I've heard these murmurs and talks and chatter always around Monaco. But the fun fact is, since 2000, more races have been won from pole position at Barcelona, 18, and Monza, 15, and Suzuka, 15, than Monaco, which is only 14. So it's not always the case that if you're on pole, you tend to win.
And undercuts are huge. I remember 2017, Kimi Raikkonen started on pole. It was Sebastian Vettel who won.
Oh,
20,
yes.
2022, Leclerc started on pole. It was Sergio Perez who won that race. A lot of it can change around, a lot of it. And Punkit has come up with the last comment of this episode, which is 30 seconds is not too bad, lol, if the pace of the car is good.
It's a little difficult with you really don't want to have penalties around this track because there's going to be lots and lots of DRS trains and traffic. It's not as easy as it sounds. And especially you can always expect a safety car or a VSC to turn up. So it's not going to be that easy.
Exactly. And the pack can often be bunched up together. So you might
Imagine
not.
getting a 30-second penalty and you have a safety car and the entire pack is bunched up. You don't want to have that.
Exactly. Exactly. But cautious note, you might see some gaps artificially creating itself because teams will have to leave some space between themselves and the other cars to avoid dirty air, but they won't be too much. And hopefully the two stopping will will make it a really good race. But fingers crossed for that. Hopefully Monaco is back to its original best and we are able to have a good Saturday, which we always do, and a good Sunday as well.
Predictions?
Predictions? I'm going Max all the way.
Okay,
Which driver are
Max,
you picking?
I'm picking Lando for this time. I've been very
Oh,
categorically told not to use redemption. So I think Lando makes a comeback.
makes a comeback. Yeah, that is a
uh,
bold prediction in a way, if I have to think of it,
think so? Um,
because
I
he's not
think
been feeling the car recently.
yeah, that's been the case, and nothing like putting yourself in a dominant position around Monaco. So that will be a statement in itself if Lando is able to put the car on pole. But let's go for a little bit more bolder one.
A bolder prediction. I think I'm going to say Carlos Sainz in the top five.
I think that's possible. I think that's possible. I am actually gonna. Maybe it's a bold prediction saying Fernando Alonso scores points, but I think he's gonna finish in the top 6 on qualifying day.
Top six on qualifying day.
I don't know. It's gonna rain on Saturday.
That genuinely is a bold prediction, my friend. But it's possible. If it's raining,
If it's raining, yes.
I wouldn't
Only
bet
if it's
against El
raining.
Padre. I wouldn't. And yeah, Krishna is right when he's saying that Monaco pole record is not great because of safety cars. Correct. It can really change things up. And sometimes what happened to Oscar Piastri can happen to you, where it just neutralizes everything and whatever advantage you have can just vanish completely. Pankaj saying Imola was so good, it gives me hope. There will be hope for sure. Krishna saying George might win this one, which is not a bad bet, honestly.
Really.
Pankaj's going for Oscar. Saraka is going for Williams. Mad respect.
Williams. Wow.
If they do put it on pole,
Nothing like that. Oh,
nothing like that.
everyone is going to go crazy if Carlos Sainz puts it on pole. My goodness. I'm
He's due
excited to
one.
see that.
He's due one. He's due one. Saturday is going to be phenomenal. And
Yeah.
we will be back on the Inside Line F1 podcast on Saturday because here, as we've all said, Saturday is the more important day compared to Sunday. And we should do a post-Saturday live stream and also tell you what you can expect for Sunday. And hopefully Punkit's bold prediction comes true. Hopefully Leclerc can get pole and save some face. But that will be all from us. See you on Saturday in the evening, which is just a couple of days away when we're going to be debriefing the qualifying session and looking forward to the race. Make sure you subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast and click on the bell notification. We can't wait to see you sometime soon. Bye-bye.